Welcome to Whips in the Dungeon 201.7. Today we're going to talk about the cutback. All the sport crackers that have been following this are going to love this video because this is probably one of the first, if not the first crack you learn when you start getting into sport cracking. We're over 50 videos into my Whips in the Dungeon instructional series, and I'm just now teaching the first crack that you would learn as a sport cracker. All of our cracks up to this point have been U-shaped cracks. They roll straight out in a U. This is actually the first S-shaped crack. It's going to come up like an elephant trunk, and then it's going to transition and roll out as a U-shape. And in sport cracking, we could take that crack, and sometimes it's called a circus crack if it goes up high in the air. If it goes farther back and comes forward, it's a Cattleman's Crack. If we do it over here on a diagonal on the backhand side, it's called a cutback. If I did it around the top above my head in a horizontal plane, I could call it a helicopter. If I pointed it down to the ground, I could call it a snake killer. We could take that one S-shaped crack and call it about 100 different things. But the reality is we're going to just call it a Cattleman's Crack or a circus crack. I'm kneeling because it takes quite a bit of ceiling height, and the reason we're going to show it or teach it as a cutback for dungeon play is because a cutback can be done with a lower ceiling height, and you can throw it at house parties and actually use this crack, whereas if you throw it traditionally on the forehand side, you're going to need a real high ceiling. So I'm kneeling, but this crack's going to come up, it's going to make an S, and it's going to roll out. And without music, I tend to miss it. So that was with a snake whip. A snake whip's going to have a little more arm motion, and then with a bullwhip. With a bullwhip, a little less arm motion, a little more passive wrist. Two mistakes happen a lot of times with a Cattleman's Crack. You'll see people doing it and they're ending up hitting the ground with it. That's because they're short arming it. I like to use the analogy of a wave at the football game. Your arm should come up like you're making the wave at the football game, and when it comes down, point it right where you want that crack to go. Now, like I said, when we stand up, I don't have enough ceiling height to show this, so if we take that crack on the same angle and angle it over on a diagonal, we're going to be able to do it with a lower ceiling height. Hopefully everyone can see that. Now, a Cattleman's Crack naturally wants to crack about 2/3 of the way down the thong. It's probably the easiest crack to actually get to crack, but the goal in the dungeon is control puffs on a person. So I teach this crack as one of the last cracks you learn, move it over into intermediate cracking. When I turn it and throw it here, you want to slow that crack down. By slowing it down, you can transition into that U shape and roll the crack all the way to the target is the goal. To not let it crack 2/3 of the way down the whip. And then when I move it to the other target, hopefully you'll be able to see it even better. So once you can control that crack and actually get it to land on the left shoulder or the left butt cheek, then it's just like the other cracks we've learned. You want to learn to do control puffs with it. That concludes 201.7. Today's key word is Newton's first law of motion.